Alrighty, guys, we've got another session in Altitudo the 14th. Alright, where's my... Alright. From last session, well, let me just start off by saying this session really humbled me. Last session was great. I put in so little effort, and everyone was telling me afterwards how much they enjoyed it. I had such very high hopes and high motivation and energy going into this session, so I put in a lot of time writing because I had so many ideas and felt like they were all worth putting down, and I was immediately humbled. So this was a good reminder session that things aren't gonna go out well or go along well just because I think they're going to go along well. I need to actually think things through. So let's start with what actually happened. All right, so we did have a full party, full 5 players. Dark Waffleus, he was just sitting around studying, I guess. I think he was making magic items. He forged a ring of protection, in fact. He was very successful in his forged a ring of protection. Nimbus, she's very much so, she's, elf rogue. She's very much so into training her horse, which she is not particularly wise, and is not, her character specifically has a low wisdom, so she is not particularly good at training her horse. But I imagine next session she is in, I'll do something, give her something to allow her horse training to be successful and or mean something, because so far she's been putting a lot of rolls, a lot of time into it, and it hasn't really been fruitful or led to anything, but clearly she cares about the horse to some extent. Okay, Humdu, I believe he was just training his temple guys. He's got his new monk initiates and his dim hat and all of his friends there. Cletus, I went out of my way to set up this Jean Valjean who am I moment where he interacted with another dwarf who was being arrested he witnessed another dwarf that was being arrested that looked just like him, was being mistaken for Cletus and being arrested for one of his crimes he committed against a fair merchants club when he tried to steal one of their caravan shipments. And so when I wrote this, I had in my mind the idea that this would be a very dramatic character developing moment where Cletus would either have to face the consequences of his actions. He would either have to walk up and take responsibility for what he was doing, or possibly just go out of his way to solidify once and for all that he doesn't care about anyone else and expects to be able to get away with all of this forever, which maybe I should have... Well, okay, what ended up happening was Dark Waffleus, who was at this point a 10,000 goldenaire, just walked up and basically said, I'm gonna pay you 100 gold pieces to fuck off, and the Fair Merchants Guild was like, alright, yeah, I guess that was about as much as he would have stolen if he was successful, but he didn't actually steal it, so I guess I'll just take this money and leave. Which, I don't know how much of this. Maybe this is the kind of thing where I should have talked to my player beforehand and said, hey, I have this character development idea in mind, let's work on this, how do you think Cletus would react in this kind of a situation? Because if I set it up, my thought process is maybe afterwards he thought oh, well, if I walk up and take responsibility for this, then I'm going to end up going to jail. And if I go to jail, then the rest of the session isn't really going to work because then I'm just going to be, in prison and I won't be able to go along on the adventure, and maybe that'll mess up the adventure. So maybe that's a generous, explanation for his thought process. Or maybe he genuinely was like, all right, well, what would Cletus do? Let me try to get out of this situation without, ending up with punishment, which is what I would do. Like, I don't want to get punished for things, so I'm going to take whatever route to not get punished. So yeah, in my mind, I had this as like a super dramatic, maybe Cletus will sit here and there will be a scene where he questions himself and thinks what is the right thing to do. But instead, it just became this like sloppy conversation that ended up just costing one of the players 100 something gold pieces, and then like that was it. So in the future, maybe I'll have this come back, because now there's this dwarf who said that he would now owe Darkwaphilus a favor. So maybe something can come of that, hopefully. Maybe something of the Fair Merchants Guild, and that interaction will come up. But that was definitely a flop of what I had hoped to be a good character encounter. And then they go on the road and they walk through the forest, and they are ambushed by a kobold who reveals himself to be related to that priest that Humdu had like killed in their earlier dungeon tavern basement quest. And this kobold said like, I'm gonna come out with revenge. I'm gonna kill you, Humdu. And he's like this poison themed kobold riding this wyvern, and he flies out and ambushes them on the road. And I think like, well, it would make sense that he attacks Humdu first because he's the one he's seeking revenge after. In hindsight, that was a mistake. I should have done well. Okay, that was a mistake because he came out. This was supposed to be Humdu's moment where he got to fight kobolds, because that was the thing that he wanted to do. Wyvern comes out, ambushes them, they get surprised, and immediately Wyvern just stings Humdu. He fails his con save, takes a bunch of poison. First round, goes out of combat. He's out of action immediately. He goes unconscious. And so this encounter that was supposed to be his sort of like anime 1v1 fight scene moment, again, ended up being a very sloppy scene where everyone else, without very much of any connection to these kobolds, just ended up like ganging up on and killing this wyvern. Which, how I originally wanted that encounter to go was like Humdu doing some crazy acrobatics, like jumping up on the wyvern, climbing up and like wrestling this kobold in midair, and then like throwing him off, doing some crazy midair flying monk acrobatic stuff, while a bunch of other kobolds would like swarm out of the forest, and then like the rest of the party was going to deal with them. That did not go the way I wanted to at all. This just left like Humdu kind of like, I could feel he was kind of just like frustrated and annoyed that like his sort of scene was kind of taken away from him. So I definitely learned some lessons there. The kobold should have just jumped out and been like, hey, you killed my priest, now I'm going to kill, or maybe the kobold should, you killed my best friend, now I'm going to kill your best friend. And then like put Humdu in this position where he has to like try to protect someone else. Or I should have just paid more attention to my player characters' max health, to not accidentally one-shot any of them. And that's another case of like, I'm a very big believer in let the dice fall as they may, roll in front of the screen. What happens, happens. And, this was an example of, well, sometimes what happens does not serve the story the best. It just Yeah, like there's that some level of realism there. Like, what would have happened? You got attacked by this wyvern. He did a good job on his attack, and you went down. Uh, so I'm not like upset that I do continue to roll in front of the screen and do all that, because I do think when things do work out, it will mean a lot more to the players and to the story for everyone to know, like, yeah, like this is what the dice said and the story worked out this way. Like, including, if the dice are the like realism element of like anything can happen in a situation. And it's not just being controlled by the guy behind the screen who says this and this and this is happening. That little like that element of verisimilitude, I think, makes the story hit harder. But this was like a clear example of it being counter to that purpose. So just off the bat, two encounters that I had hoped to be like great, fulfilling character moments that really like evolved people, just ended up being like super low energy, super clumsy. So you were just not off to a great start in this session. So they get to the hell portal. They come to discover that they failed to close it when they left, and that it's just been remained open. And because of it being open, demons have been swarming out. So they've been introduced to a rival party: Sir Bohemond, Thibault, Flingeldeck, and Todrick, each of which are characters they've encountered in the past. And my hope is that for this rival party to sort of be an example of like the town that like loves these people, and they become super popular because they actually like help the townsfolk, and sort of just be an example as to like what their party isn't, just to sort of like juxtapose, and hopefully they build a rivalry. Like, hopefully my plan is to maybe like have some other quests that this rival party like completes before the other party, and like takes that opportunity away from them, so that they build a little bit of resentment towards this party, and they have reasons to try to like want to hinder this party, or like to have a rival that they want to like do better than in any given sense, whether that be like just fame and renown from the rest of the town or whatever. But I digress. Okay, so they come across the portal again. There's the rival party. There's a whole platoon, like a regiment of Knights of the Red Plume. These like super gallant, honorable knights. They are attacking these imps that have come out of the portal, and it's like the imps are pinning down these knights in this party. So my intention was for the PCs to do something clever. Ideally, like, all right, well, while these imps are pinning down these knights, like, go and flank the imps to make an opening. And they did end up still doing something. They had like a clever answer to this situation, in that the bard Adrian. Oh right, I forgot. So he had his clown Bonzo do some rumor gathering and some intelligence on the underworld. He discovered that a rival gang that they had encountered in the past, the Roadhounds, have this smuggling operation where they plan on bringing in unicorn horns. So hopefully that's like a little hook that can lead into something in the future. But so the imps, they're fighting them. So I was hoping for like a clever solution from the party, which they do give me. They take all like the knights' horses that have been like tied up to a tree like a little ways back. They cut them all loose and like started stampede to like trample all the imps and like get them to flee, to create an opening for the portal, which they do, and they succeed. That is like the one encounter that I think actually went well, was interesting. I had this like sort of skill challenge check where they needed to succeed multiple skill checks and or help each other out, and some of the party like split up and they were pushing up behind knights with shields to advance. So I was happy with that, how encounter went. That was very like there was a lot of movement in there, and there was a lot of like creative thinking and problem solving. That's the one encounter that I was happy with. So they get through the portal, then a giant pit fiend jumps out and bursts out and tries to scare everyone, and he flies off. And all the knights in the rival party basically say like, okay, so player characters, you guys destroy this portal, make sure nothing else comes out of it. We're gonna go chase that pit fiend and make sure he doesn't get up to any horrible shenanigans. So the party says, yeah, we'll do that. But of course, they want to go inside the portal because they want to track down Lurius Payne. And so they don't destroy it, they go inside the portal. But this time they do know to close it on their way out. They know that's something they have to worry about. So they don't have to worry about, or at least unless anyone else comes across the portal. They have fair reason to believe that they won't have to deal or worry about any more demons coming out of the portal. But yeah, so they go inside. They go to the second level of the Labyrinth of Lurius. They collect some other missing loot and treasure they got from the first floor, and they head to the second floor. They see Lurius, and he casts a spell on them, but Adrian counterspells it, and he runs away on his palanquin of mummies. There's a bunch of Yuan Ti sitting on cushions, smoking their hookah, and the PCs, well, Darkophilus just fireballs, kills all of them at once, and there's like an oasis with like a deep, deep pond of like an oasis that a Hydra is hiding in. One of the players investigates the oasis, peers inside. The Hydra wakes up and jumps out, starts fighting them. They all fight the Hydra, and they do a pretty good job. I feel like I wish I had maybe toned down the Hydra a little more, because the Hydra was just going to slaughter. Well, the Hydra ended up in a situation where at the beginning, when it had a bunch of heads, it was terrifying and like was knocking people down and killing them. But then as they just severed more and more heads, it became less and less of a threat. And I feel like the fight became less and less exciting as that encounter went on. Whereas maybe I should have done something like maybe start off with like just a one-headed Hydra, but there's like a Yuan Ti dude just sitting on his back, like chopping off the Hydra's heads and making it cause more and more heads to grow, so that the players had like a difficult time facing the encounter rather than just like making it easier and easier. It's just another flop of an encounter. But they do eventually kill the Hydra. They discover that like there's a gate, a portcullis separating them from where Lurius has gone, and so yeah, they need like a magic key in order to get through that portcullis. And there was the gate was like, the portcullis was enchanted with this like extreme heat metal, and Darkophilus had this idea to use his magic in order to super cool, because he has like Ray of Frost and like that kind of stuff. So it's like, let me cool down the gate, and then like, you know, we can open it without having to find this magic super hot key, which is something I wish I had thought about beforehand, because I was like, oh, that is a great idea, but I like, just timing wise, pacing wise, I need to start like wrapping things up, and if I let you do that, then you know, then like you guys would have no reason to not just like continue this session, even though it's getting pretty late. Which I think was like another fumble on my part, because I just told him like, yeah, you would need higher level magic in order to break this enchantment, which on one hand I think is fair, but on the other hand I wish I didn't have to resort to that. I wish I could have rewarded the creativity in that thought rather than like dissuade it. not dissuade, but like discourage it, I guess. So yeah, they also they find an Ankh, and this Ankh is basically they find a magic item buried in the oasis, and it's basically like a Minecraft totem of undying or whatever that is called, where basically if you're holding it and you die, you come back to life. Um, so overall, lots of misses this session. Very humbling. A reminder that I need to think of stuff from the perspective of a player and or players who are just going to do the most straightforward, easiest thing that takes the least amount of responsibility, and that just like is the easiest way to get out of something, rather than from my DM perspective, where I think like, oh, if everything goes exactly how I want it to be, like if this moment goes perfectly, then it could be so incredibly dramatic. Like if this goes how I envision it to go, it'll be dramatic. Whereas I need to think of things from the perspective of like, what's the most likely thing they're going to do in this situation, rather than what could be the most dramatic things that could possibly come out of this situation. So overall, a bit of a, I think I've been noticing a cycle of like good session hyping me up and making me think that I'm going to do another great session, and then that always being followed by a session that I have way too high of hopes for and expect way too great of a session out of, and ends up being a little bit of a stinker. And then I have another great one after that once I realize like I've made a bunch of mistakes. I need to fix those mistakes. So I do think with that pattern having been followed these past couple of sessions, I do think there's going to be a good session next time. But maybe I'm setting myself up, which I don't think I've done in the past, thinking like, well, I had a bad one last time, so this is going to be a good one. Maybe I need to get out of that mindset and then think that it's going to be bad, so I end up writing a good one. I don't know. But yeah, overall, lots of mistakes I'm going to have to fix. Definitely humbling and a good reminder of there always being stuff to improve on. Just a little bonus for this session, a very, very quick review of Vox Machina, because I had just finished watching it. This is on my mind, so I figured I'd get that out there. My overall review is that if you are a D&D player and or a DM, it is a very relatable, very entertaining, very enjoyable, and very like cathartic if you watch it from the perspective of a player and or dungeon master of D&D. And if you have like played D&D before and you know what a session of D&D is like, then it is a great and entertaining show. And I feel like if you have no idea what D&D is and you are watching it entirely from the perspective of someone who's just watching it as a TV show to put on, it is probably the most like cringe-inducing, embarrassing, like probably on the tier of like having like showing your grandma and like an anime like, oh, my brother and I are slimes and we went on an adventure, and one of those like unholy animes with a whole paragraph as their title. So my main argument, my main example for this, and that like this is the most egregious one I think ever occurs on the show, but stuff to this extent happens constantly. So here's the situation. So there's a bunch of player characters basically, and they are suffering through this horrific nuclear inferno holocaust. These dragons are flying and literally burning and melting everyone around them. They're seeing like families get destroyed, people's like skin and faces like melting off as they're like grabbing their ankles, like, please help me, please, no, no. And they're literally experiencing like the worst, most horrific, traumatic experience one could possibly ever suffer through. Like, this is some like Pol Pot times 10 level of like just firebombing the city, countless people just dying and being murdered, and like family, just horrible, 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 people like just experiencing the worst possible thing anyone could ever imagine. And so if you watch this from the perspective of a TV show watcher, then you probably expect this to be followed up by some like, okay, so that was some like horrific Holocaust tier, just people's lives being like extinguished like ants in an anthill, just with no second thought, no remorse. And you're probably expecting some Oscar Schindler monologue of how the players come up and say like, oh dear God, this spell slot, I could have used this spell slot for 5 lives, I could have saved 5 people, oh my magic amulet, if I had just used this magic, I could have saved 10 more people, 10 lives that are lost, woe is me, this is so sad, this is a horrible trauma that, and this guilt and shame that I'm experiencing is going to hang so heavy on me, and I'm going to be dealing with this for the rest of my life. At least that's what the tone like the established tone is kind of sets you up to expect. Like, that's what one would probably think that is going to happen, when in reality, like a couple scenes later, the bard is creating magic booba, and the barbarian walks over and goes, awooga, awooga, hamana, 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 ba 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 ba. And, so if you're just a TV show watcher, the tonal whiplash, like, would snap your neck, and you would be like that Clint Eastwood, like, just like smirking and like not smirking, but like just like total disgust, and like just like questioning what in the like anime am I watching? Dear God, what is happening? Just be feel like, yeah, you would feel more shame than these characters. You would be thinking like, Jesus Christ, I have seen like Muppet movies that have taken like less severe traumatic experiences more seriously than whatever is going on in this show right now. And I wouldn't be surprised if you like turned it off when that happened. But if you are a D&D player, personally, I couldn't help but like sit back and smile, because I'm like, yep, that is pretty much exactly what would happen in D&D. Like, that is exactly something that I could very easily see happening. Like, yep, these guys have just experienced the worst horrible trauma, people's skin melting and their bones blackening and their eyes pouring out of their sockets, screaming and begging for mercy and help, and like friends and families and entire lives just being like torn apart, and then the bard says, okay, and just like walks off, and then starts making says he wants to make some magic boobies and start playing with them. Which is like, if you play D&D, you're like, yep, that's D&D right there, and that is like pretty much exactly what happens. So from that perspective, very entertaining, very funny. If you're watching it as a real TV show, you'll probably be horrified and embarrassed. So yeah, mainly, I guess my recommendation is, if you are a D&D player, go ahead, watch it. Funny, entertaining. If you don't know what D&D is, like, don't hurt yourself by even trying. But yeah, that's about all I got. All right, I'll see you next time.